What's going on, everybody? Welcome back. So as you can tell from the last video, engine didn't come out. So what we've done is I have gotten myself a new cylinder right here, install it onto the cherry picker. We're gonna get this thing set up tomorrow, which is Saturday. Got the same group of guys coming over. We're gonna get the engine out and hopefully split the transmission apart, get the transmission put onto the new engine, and we can get this thing started on the road to recovery. But yeah, the new cylinder was $40 from Amazon, got it shipped here. Prime, thank you Amazon, but it's installed right now. And so we're gonna put this back on time lapse and show you how the engine goes second time around. So cross your fingers, here we go. All right, we're back. Sorry about that. My GoPro battery is shot, so it keeps dying real fast. As you can see, engine is out of the car, and it wasn't easy or fun. Two things. One, this plastic trim right here. It can come loose. It's tabs right here. I broke maybe one popping it out, but it can come loose, and that helps tremendously because we can just bend it up as the engine's coming out. We couldn't figure out how to get the windshield wipers off. We can get the bolts off, but they wouldn't disconnect. So just lift up on this and it gives a lot. So you can pull it up that way. Second is, as you know, the car is pretty much on the ground. We had to pull the jack stands out, put a jack up underneath there and lower it as low as it would go. And the reason for that is I have a normal human-sized garage. I don't have one of these shops that a lot of people do this in, or lifts or anything. We're doing this the home mechanic way. And so I had to drop it all the way down, put a jack underneath there, and this is as low as we could get it. At that point, we were able to pull it out into the driveway. And there is the engine in all its HydroLocked glory. One thing that was shocked is when you buy an engine from LKQ, they don't put the torque converter on. Mine is missing this torque converter. What makes this even harder for me is this engine is HydroLocked. I can't move the crankshaft. I can't move this gear assembly. So what I'm having to do is get a 14 and get on these bolts on the backside and break them loose so the torque converter and flywheel will come off. Actually, I'm sorry, the flywheel will not, this won't come off. Just a torque converter from here, and we'll take this torque converter and put it on the new engine. There's a transmission. That's your automatic transmission. It's tiny, relatively. When pulling the transmission, there's only two connectors, which is nice. You got your transmission computer and then some sort of sensor. This is your gear sensor, park, reverse, drive, that kind of thing. That's your gear sensor. That's it for the sensors. Bolt-wise, there's 9 bolts. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and it goes all the way around. And what we did, this might help you, is we labeled them 1 through 9. Here's number 1. We actually put 1 there. And on the transmission, we marked 2, and 1 is somewhere. We'll have to find where it is. I think it's underneath. It's down there somewhere. So 1, 2, and we went clockwise, or counterclockwise. So that'll help you keep the bolts straight. There were 9 total, about half were 14s, half were 17s. So that's where we're at right now. Getting this torque converter off, put it on the new engine, stab the transmission back on. There are 2 pins. Let's see, they're not on here. They're on the engine itself. There's 1 pin there. I think there's 1 at the bottom somewhere. No, just 1 pin. Just 1 pin. Or it came out. Well, there should be 2 pins. I think they go right there. So we'll have to look for that second pin. It may have popped out. I don't think. Well, yeah, it's loose. So we'll put the pins back on, and then transmission will go back on. and then the fun part of getting the engine back in. So we'll get you there. Also, another tip is we have this big red jack, but this thing helped tremendously. This allows you to angle the engine left or right. It's not a straight up and pull piece. There's no way you can pull this engine with just a straight up and down pull. We had to tilt the engine this way in the transmission, transmission this way. It takes a lot of finagling to get engine and transmission out at the same time. Now, if you're doing just the engine and leaving the transmission in there, or vice versa, you won't need that. But if you're doing the whole thing, invest in one of these. I don't know what they're called. They just allow you to angle your engine and transmission different ways to pull it past. Also, my plan for the AC compressor didn't work. We ended up having to pull it up and out. I cut the zip ties to the fans. We ended up zip tying it to the frame up here through here because the hoses were, you can even see some of the damage. They were rubbing when they were coming out. And there was no way we could get the engine out with the AC compressor down here. So that's another tip. This motor mount, both the bracket and the silver piece. Let me show you on the engine. So this is your motor mount. Let me get the part for it. Well, I'm not sure what happened to it. It got relocated. Anyways, there's the mount, the black mount that attaches here with 3 bolts, and then you got a bolt that attaches that to this. We had to pull both of them out. This stayed with the engine. The black mount came separate and off. So that's how we had to get it out. You had to remove both of them, basically. So I hope that makes sense. If not, when you're looking at yours, it'll make sense to you. But both the black bracket that surrounds us plus the bolt that goes into the silver one had to come out. So that's where we're at. Any updates, I'll stop and I'll start recording. So, but we're making progress. All right, so an update. As you can see, we've kind of disassembled part of the old engine. If you are doing this because you have a HydroLocked engine, you have a lot of work ahead of you. We ended up having to take this bottom cover off to expose the crankshaft. We had to pull the pistons off the crankshaft and the bearings and all that and tap the pistons back up into the cylinders. So they're all at top dead center right now. Only once we were able to do that were we able to rotate the crankshaft here. Torque converter was still attached, as you saw from the last video, still attached to the flywheel. And so the only way we could rotate this around, because, you can't use box end on these. You'll round out the bolts. You have to use a socket on these. So we had to actually break loose all the pistons. I had to pull the oil pump. I had to pull the oil pan. I had to pull a ton of stuff to get to this. We tapped all of them up into the top dead center, and then only then could we rotate the crankshaft because something's broken up in here from the HydroLocked. It was probably a cocked piston into cylinder, something jammed it to where we couldn't get up in there. So then we rotated these. Then, as you can see in here, we finally got the transmission back on after about 2 hours. And stabbing this transmission is hard. We put 2 bolts in top, 2 bolts in top bottom, and we tried sucking it together. Well, once we got about an 1/8 inch of a gap between the engine and the transmission, it wouldn't go any further. And also a bigger problem was we tried to rotate the crankshaft and it wouldn't budge, which means something was wrong. So after taking it off and putting it back on 2 or 3 times, putting the torque converter on the engine just to make sure the 2ARFE of this RAV4 matched, this U760 Scion transmission, we tried it one more time, and this is how you do it. Put 2 on the top, 2 on the bottom, crank them down to where, loosely, to where you got about an 1/8 of an inch gap. At that point, the crankshaft still rotates, but barely. You'll have to put some muscle into it. Rotate the crankshaft while you got 2 guys up here kind of wiggling and pushing the transmission. I had to have my dad and my brother-in-law come over and do this. While they were pushing and moving this, all of a sudden we heard a pop, and it just went straight into the engine, and we aligned it. And then we just torqued everything together. They had to head out, and I'm heading out to Mexico, so this is on hold for right now. Another thing is, if you're going to get a replacement engine and keep your original transmission, LKQ is where I bought this. It's from Akron, Ohio. And what I've noticed is this is not the right connectors. This is from a RAV4, and apparently RAV4 has, as it would be logical, different connectors. So I have 2 of these plus my ground. Okay, so 2 connectors there. Let's go look at the other engine. you'll see, completely different. Not even the same remote, and there's 3 of them. So what I'm going to have to do is going to have to remove all of this wiring off this engine, remove all the wiring from the other engine, and swap it. So RAV4 engines and Scion TC engines are not the same. That engine is a 2013. This is a 2014. They did something on the wiring. So lots and lots of work. And just to tell you a story, my mechanic, he's a Vietnamese mechanic, K&N Auto in Fort Worth, awesome guy. When I asked him how much it would be to swap out this engine, he quoted me $750. And I am kicking myself now. $750 was a steal compared to the work we've had to do today. That being said, I have learned a ton, not only about the Scion TC, but about engines in general and automatic transmissions, torque converters. This is a huge learning experience for me. I'm never doing this again, but it's been a great experience as far as what it takes for an engine and transmission to work together and all the connections in the engine bay and fuel and coolant and oil. And it's a learning experience. I don't know if it was worth $750 saved or not. We'll find out if I can get this thing back on the road and it works correctly. But in any case, engine and transmission are mounted up together correctly. So at this point, it's going to be ripping this whole wire harness out of this engine, pulling it off the other engine, and then mating them back up, and then putting it back in the car. And then body work. I got to do the side skirt paint. I got to do the front bumper paint. I got the new front bumper right over there. The side skirts back there in the corner. So, my original timeline is currently November 1st, 2019. I started this October 1st, 2019. I had a month, goal. I want to have this thing back on the road in a month. I bought it August of 19, but I had to sit outside because it was just too hot to leave my wife's car in the driveway with 2 kids in Texas 110-degree heat. Just can't do that to my kids. So I'm going to go for another month's timeline, December. So I'm hoping to have this thing knocked out in 1 more month. But for right now, at least the engine is out. Engine and transmission are out. Engine and transmission are put together for the new engine and the old transmission. And I got some wiring to do. And then in a couple of weeks, we'll get the boys back over here and we'll drop it back in. And then it's reassembly backwards, which I'll document that too, I think, just to help you guys out. So anyways, here's the carnage. Just tools, engines, car parts everywhere. This is the oil pump and a whole bunch of bolts that held it to the bottom of the engine. Here's the bottom half of the engine, bottom half cover. There's the crankshaft pulley, bolts. It's just a mess. And then of course, when we dump this thing over like that, I would say a good 16 ounces of water, maybe 8 ounces, poured out of here. It still had water in the cylinders and the interior of the engine. So this thing definitely got a good drink of water that rain day. But so anyways, thanks for watching. See you guys in a couple of weeks. Welcome back. All right, so tonight, see the engine's gone. This is the old one, torn apart over here. What I have learned is that this harness is unique to the Scion TC. It's got a bunch of different connections that I don't have on this RAV4 engine over here. And not to mention, when LKQ removed it, they cut a whole bunch of cables like here and a bunch of other on this harness up here. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to pull this harness off here, figure out where it attaches. It doesn't look too hard. Just a bunch of these stupid plastic clips, metal brackets, whatnot. Shouldn't be too bad, I hope. A couple of bolts holding the whole harness on. Once I get this one off and I know how it pulls off, I'm going to come over here to the new engine, pull this one off, and as I'm pulling it off, put the other harness in right behind it. So that's what we're going to be doing today. Hopefully it's not too bad because it's freezing cold out here, and I've got people coming over tomorrow to help me put the new engine and transmission back in. So we're going to get started. Man, it's been a good day. Had my dad and my brother over, and it's back in. Got the hood back in, mounted correctly, it closes perfectly. Reattached the center radiator support and hood latch. The overflow tank, AC lines are all buttoned up and where they're supposed to be. And I got the AC compressor back in, and that's done. So at this point, it's just figuring out the hoses. Most of these go to the intake, which I'm actually going with an aftermarket intake to prevent hydrolocking in the future. Hoses here, transmission line here, or transmission coolant hoses here. Got to get the exhaust manifold hooked up to the exhaust. Alternator, starter. We want to put the starter back in, just make sure there's no holes, anything can fall into the engine now that it's in all the way. And so at this point, it's all buttoned up. It is good to go, and we'll be slowly working on this over the next couple of weeks, a couple of nights, putting everything back together, and then we'll do the test start. So thanks for watching. Have a good one.